The following is brought to you by the Leave It in the Ring podcast network. All boxing, no filter.
Greetings and welcome to the Boxing Esquire podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Boxing Esquire podcast, presented by The Ring and ringtv.com and distributed by the Leave It in the Ring network. My guest on this episode is David Duenez, who's the owner of the Leave It in the Ring podcast network. Great guy. Really enjoyed chopping it up with him. We talked about some of the better fights that went on this weekend. The Kovalev-Yarde fight, which is a good one, and the fights on PBC, Figueroa, Fulton. We also got into the Ruiz-Joshua 2 match, which appears to be on, even though there were some conflicting reports going on during the week. We talked about Dana White getting into the sport as well. And we also got into David's background and how he got into the sport and started the podcast. Great conversation. Hope you enjoy. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Boxing Esquire podcast my good friend and I guess my boss, the owner of the Leave It in the Ring podcast network, Mr. David Duenez. How you doing, David?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for inviting me on your show. It's I've been a fan before you even came on Leave It in the Ring network. I've been a fan. I was the one that reached out to you, remember? And it was like, Absolutely. Hey, why don't you bring it down this way?
Yeah, no doubt.
Why don't you cross the street?
Exactly.
That's the way it was put. Hey, why don't you cross the street and come over here? You know?
Absolutely. No, I was psyched because you've had a ton of great podcasts on your network. So we'll definitely get into that a little later on. But yeah, man, just wanted to chop it up. I missed the podcast with you and Gabriel. So, I love talking boxing with you guys. So, calling in and stuff. So I figured I'd just, have you on the pod and we could talk about some fights. So yeah, man, this weekend we had a big one in the light heavyweight division, really interesting one. Sergey Kovalev taking on an unbeaten, really strong challenger, and Anthony Yarde from Great Britain. Really great fight. Kovalev got the stoppage. What'd you think of both fighters in that one?
I got to eat some crow because even when the fight was being negotiated, I honestly was picking Anthony Yarde to pull it off. A big, strong kid. I like the way he throws his combinations to the body and he paints back upstairs. I wasn't really sure the mental state of Kovalev. I know Buddy McGirt is a great trainer, really good trainer. I've had my pleasure speaking to him numerous times, either on the podcast or in person. But what I noticed with Buddy at times is that he'll get a guy that's going kind of spiraling down, and he gets him back, at a level where you're. It's kind of like a mirage sometimes, right? He did a great job with Arturo Gatti. He had him boxing, but as soon as you got him back to the ropes, as soon as you got him back into that mud, they always reverted to their old self. So I wasn't sure with Kovalev if that was going to happen. And obviously, Kovalev's a completely different fighter from Gatti, and he was able to use a lot of his experience. His amateur background came into light. He was able to capitalize on Anthony Yarde's inexperience in being in championship rounds. Let me ask you this: what? I thought it was a gimmick when Yarde's trainer said we do no sparring. I didn't believe that. I was like, that can't be true. That just can't be true. You just can't prepare yourself, especially against the crusher like that, without any sparring, without testing whether or not you're gonna, if you have that second, third, because that's not.
Oh, I lose. Okay, there you go.
If they have that second or third gear, if it's needed, you know what I mean? And,
right.
And then you also want to be able to capitalize on the mistakes of your opponent. That's what a trainer's supposed to do. I've always compared the trainer as the coach watchtower in a football game. They're the guys up in the top. They're able to see the whole field. They're able to see all the plays that are being played out. And then they're the ones that call down to the field coach, which would be the fighter who's in the ring, and call in the mistakes and make these adjustments that need to be needed. well, how do you do that if you don't even know if your guy can make those adjustments on the fly when you don't have no sparring? So I was really, really puzzled by that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, with Yarde, I mean, there's only, I mean, it's funny. I used to manage a fighter who hated sparring, just did not want to spar, Giovanni Lorenzo. I mean, he would run, wow. he would run like a marathon. If you let him, I mean, the guy could run like the wind, but he just hated sparring, just would not spar. It was hell to get him into spar, and I just don't. You can't be at that. You can't. I mean, you can get to the world class level, but you're not going to be successful at the world class level just on natural talent. And I mean, Danny Romero, I think, was the same way. Danny Romero, they kept his sparring very limited, right? But at least he did some sparring. Right. I mean, if they did no sparring, it's crazy. Yeah, his trainer is getting a lot of stick for that. Tunde was at Ajayi. For all his talking and, all the woofing that they did, and then they did no sparring. And yeah, it seemed like, I mean, this was a huge step up in class for Yarde too. I mean, he hadn't really faced anybody top 10, even top 25. And it just looked like when he got in there and felt that jab from Kovalev, it just kind of froze him for a little bit. I mean, he hung in there, but his aggression wasn't the same as it was against the lower level guys. And he didn't seem to get going until about the 7th or 8th round. So, but
yeah, it almost just goes back to showing you that without putting in some rounds where you're moving your hands and you're moving your head against a guy that's trying to hit you, it has to shake off some of that rust, and you saw that in those first couple of rounds. It took him a while to understand that he was in a fight. And speaking about Kovalev's jab, it's one of the best in the business. I mean, that's where that jab has got him to where he was at. It's not the first time we've seen Kovalev drop or stop a guy with a jab.
Right.
So what I've heard, what I've even witnessed is seeing guys that if they are going to spar, it's probably like a minute or two. And it's very limited. Like they're not going all out. They're doing it 60%. I've seen that. Because then it's whether or not there's a lot of tissue that's been damaged, and they don't want to risk the chance of a guy getting cut or anything like that. I've seen that, but for a young lion like that, that's getting ready to actually have the opportunity to be a shining star in front of the world, I have no words for that. People were hitting me up on Leaving the Ring Gmail. They were like, "Can you believe this?" And I was like, "Maybe." I go, "Maybe there's some truth to it, maybe there isn't." But after watching that fight, oh God, there was a lot of truth to it. I couldn't believe it.
Right. Yeah, especially a guy who's only had like 12 amateur fights and 18 pro fights. I mean, you need to get him as much time in the ring sparring and honing his skills as you can. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing that he got as far as he did and actually did as well as he did. I mean, it was a competitive fight. And it just seemed like, the commentators are ringside. He's got heart. He's got power. And if he'd only when he had success, not just standing his ground, but backing Kovalev up and, whipping those hard shots to the body, Kovalev looked like he was about to come apart. And then Yarde kind of gassed and just wasn't able to fight that way. But, great learning lesson. But you just think, man, if he just had a little more seasoning, both in the gym and, maybe a couple tougher fights to get him ready, that title could have been his.
A lot of times, a lot of folks would blame the fighter. This is one where you just really got to put everything on the trainer.
Right.
It's like, hey, not only is it a great experience and a hard lesson for the fighter, it is for his team as well.
Right. Absolutely. So Kovalev, gets through those tough spots. He gets the late stoppage at home. I mean, do you think it was a tough fight. It's a tough physical fight for him. You think he's going to be ready for, everyone's talking about Canelo a little later in the year. Think he'll be ready in time, or is he a little chewed up from this fight? I mean, it seems like the money's going to talk in this situation.
Yeah, it definitely looks like the money's going to talk. At 5'8", 160, I mean, what was the heaviest he fought? was what a catchweight with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.
or Rocky Fielding, one of those,
154, something like that.
Yeah, Rocky Fielding.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so exactly. So I mean, I think it's a very interesting fight. Is there a lot of wear and tear with Kovalev? Absolutely, we saw it. But again, Yarde is a big kid. Yarde, if I remember correct, he fought maybe one or two fights.
Oop, your mic went forward. There you go. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, he was coming forward and was able to push back Kovalev. So we saw Kovalev had to dig deep as well. Can Canelo do the same thing? It's really hard to say, and I think that's why it makes it such an interesting fight. Could Canelo, who's the more talented guy right now, in my opinion, he's more fluent in what he's been doing, been very consistent in his counterpunching. He's gotten better coming forward at times, and it might have some reason because of his knee. He has to do that. If he could win this fight, it's going to be a hard-earned fight against Kovalev. So I see a lot of people saying that he's going to be the favorite. I'm not entirely sold with that yet. I know in Vegas Canelo would be the favorite, but I don't know, Kurt. To me, right now, it's a 50-50 fight. It really depends. Kovalev should be riding high off of this Yarde fight because it was a young, tough kid that could punch, who is athletic, just didn't have the experience. Canelo doesn't have that power to keep a big guy like Kovalev off, but he would definitely make him miss a lot and frustrate him enough where it could mentally break him down, where Andre Ward was able to do that and make him quit at times and get really sloppy. But Ward is a big guy as well, too. So to me, there's a lot of questions that could be answered if they fight, but I'm not going to be so quick as saying, oh, it's a good fight for Canelo and it's a very easy winnable one. I think it's a winnable one, but I think it's going to be hard fought for him.
Absolutely. Yeah, it kind of brings me back to the first Kovalev-Ward fight where, Ward got in there with Kovalev. He'd had a long layoff. He'd had a couple of tune-ups, but it took him like at least, 4 or 5 rounds to be able to deal with, all the incoming from Kovalev, that heavy jab, which shook him at one point, the right hand, which dropped him. Kovalev doesn't have a lot more than that, but what he has is really good. He's got a great jab and a thunderous right hand. So, and Canelo's a really short guy, and he's in there with the biggest guy and most dangerous guy he's ever fought. So you figure it's probably going to be Canelo maybe giving away a couple of those early rounds, but it just seemed like when Yarde started pressing a tiring Kovalev and firing to the body, Kovalev was just grabbing on for dear life. And, you got to think Canelo's seeing that going, yeah, I can do that. But I don't know if he can stop him. That's the thing. It's going to be a tough fight.
I don't either.
Yeah.
It's a very tough fight. And I'm going to tell you, okay, I got to give it to Canelo. Even talking about this, if this fight happens, you got to give the kid props. Even now, absolutely. All the opposition that he's been getting in there, they're different faces of boxing and styles. I'm wondering, are they looking at Kovalev because he has such a European style that he's so upright sometimes, his punches are straight down the pipe, which works for Canelo because he can, he's got great head movement, so he can make Kovalev miss a lot. But the one thing that we know about Kovalev is that Kovalev can get dirty. He can get nasty in there.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that Canelo hasn't really been up against because, fighting Gennady Golovkin, regardless of the image that's been kind of changing for him of recent, is not really a dirty guy inside the ring.
Right.
Very professional. Kovalev's a bit different. He's a bit different, man.
Right.
There's a real mean streak with the guy.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. You look at it and you see what Golovkin's main weapon. Lately, when he's not bombing guys out of there, it's his jab, right? He's got one of the best jabs in the business, and
right.
Certainly in the second fight, Canelo definitely dealt with it a lot better than he did the first time around. He kind of took it took it away from being an offensive weapon and turned it into like, a defensive weapon. Like, Golovkin wasn't like, pushing him back with that jab. He was just trying to, kind of firing it off the back foot and trying to fend him off with the jab. So, Canelo can deal with a jab, but I just get the feeling it's going to take him some rounds to kind of deal with all the Kovalev's putting on him, and we'll see if he can, once Kovalev starts to fade a little bit, if he can turn it on like Ward and Alvarez did. And get the win. I just don't see him stopping Kovalev, though. Exactly. So it's going to be a grinder for 12
really
rounds.
Move a lot lately.
Right.
And that also poses the question about Canelo's knee,
right?
Because he's going to have a big guy coming forward. Is his knee going to hold up to it?
Right.
Is he going to revert to moving like he's done before? He's going to try to be the boxer, because the last 3 fights that we witnessed, the last 4 fights actually we witnessed from Canelo, is that he changed up his style coming forward. He did it with Danny Jacobs. We didn't think that he was going to really do that with Danny, but he did. Right. He was able to stay there, didn't move a lot. He moved his waist a lot, which made Danny Jacobs miss a lot of his punches, tired him out. Kovalev's going to obviously throw punches, going to make him miss as well, but you're going to have a bigger guy leaning on you, pushing you back. So that's why I said it's a very, very interesting fight on TV or DAZN.
Yeah, it definitely be on DAZN. Do you have a pick at this? Like an early stab at a pick? Who do you think wins that one?
Well, I would have to go with the money cash cow if it's going to go 12 rounds, man. I'm going to go with Canelo.
Yeah, I think so
but
too.
Hey, tell what's signed. I don't know, right?
Yeah. I think also, Canelo has not lost any close decisions, but you just look at Kovalev's age and the fact that he's coming right back off a really tough, grinding fight. And Canelo is maybe, his skill level is I don't know if it's on a par with Andre Ward, but it's certainly up there at this point. I mean, he gets better with every fight. So, yeah, you'd think that Canelo's going to find a way to win, but it's definitely not going to be easy. It's definitely going to be quite the puzzle, and I'm definitely interested in seeing that fight. It's going to be a great fight. So
it'd be a great fight. You also got to look at this too. Canelo, before taking the Triple G fight, if you look before where he had obtained the middleweight title, and then he dropped it, he vacated it. You could still sense there wasn't some sureness yet. He wasn't really sure what he could do at a middleweight division. And after fighting Triple G twice, you kind of get the sense that his confidence is just boosted. He took one of the meanest middleweight punchers in the division, one of the guys that, has made the claim, and we've seen the claim of being the most avoided middleweight titleist for a very long time. Ganetti's knocked guys out in 2-3 rounds, or he's brutally beating you to submission, right? So ever since then, I don't know. I see a very different Canelo Alvarez, a very confident. And that's why I'm not surprised him calling out Kovalev, them talking about getting into it, Sergey. I'm not surprised with it at all. You know, so I'm excited if it happens, man. Definitely, it's a fight to see. Absolutely.
So the one fight on the undercard I just wanted to note. There's a really interesting heavyweight named Evgeny Romanov who won in the first round. TKO won. 34 years old. He didn't turn pro until 2016. But the interesting thing about him was he stopped Deontay Wilder in the amateurs, and he dropped Deontay Wilder. And just as a pro, his form just looks as good as it did when he was an amateur. I mean, he's a short heavyweight. He's only 6 feet tall, but really intriguing guy. He's an older prospect, but he's getting guys out of there in a hurry. And I'm sure they want to push him as fast as they can if he's 34. But I think he could make some noise. That was kind of the one fight on the undercard that caught my eye. But listen, let's talk about Brandon Figueroa. the PBC had a card, and Brandon defended his title, his WBA interim junior featherweight title against Javier Nicolas Cintron of Argentina. He stopped him in the fourth round. Brandon is, it seems like, I was a big Omar Figueroa fan, but then he just kind of lost the plot a little bit. He seemed to stop, training hard, right. And he went off the rails a little bit. His little brother seems a lot more serious, and I really like him as a fighter. What do you think of Brandon?
I like him too.
Yeah.
I like Brandon. I like Brandon a lot, and I think you're right in terms of where their focus is at. Omar just, I think that's always been the big question mark, even before the fans started seeing it. Everybody behind the scenes, everybody that I spoke to back before, when Omar was being talked up a lot, we're all saying the same thing. Like, we're not sure if this guy's serious. He doesn't show up to camp. He doesn't want to spar. He doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to train. It was hard to get him to the gym. There was always something circling around him. With his brother, I'm not really hearing a whole lot of that. Right. I'm hearing there's more of a serious attitude about that. And there's always, you see this in the gyms all the time. The guy with the most talent is the guy that it's hard to press to get him in there. Is the guy that works hard and earns his skill level. And I'm not saying Brandon's like that, but I'm just saying that he may be the kid that he's earning it. He doesn't want to get automatically it given to him, so he's fighting for it. Well, Omar was a little different. Everybody was kind of jumping on that wagon a little too early, too soon.
Yeah, he looked so good in those showbox fights, just like drilling, other prospects in 1 or 2 rounds, and his style was so exciting. I think people really wanted him to succeed and be like the next great fighter. And it just didn't quite pan out. I mean, he did win a world title. He got a couple nice wins, Ricky Burns and so on, but and Robert Guerrero. But he ballooned up in weight, and his last fight kind of was like a bridge too far against Ugas. Ugas just took him to school. So, yeah, man. Well, listen, Brandon.
Not to bag on Omar so much because.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say not to bag on him so much because when Omar was talked up about being the next great thing. There was a lot of other fighters, like you had Frankie Gomez, you had Jose Benavidez Jr., and I think it was because we had such a dry spell, or there was a panic that there was not going to be another star, to come out of boxing, and especially a Mexican star. I think fight fans were thirsting for it, and promoters knew that, so they were all kind of rushing to the ring to find that next big thing. Nobody was letting these guys kind of develop. We were just kind of rushing them to that pinnacle that we were hoping they were going to get. They didn't work them to it. They just pushed them there. I think that was the problem with a lot of these guys. Where as of right now, we're seeing a lot of these younger fighters, prospects, are starting to get slowly built up to that platform. Was rightfully so the right way, which is fighting, doing it the traditional way, get in the ring.
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, man, I mean, I love Brandon Figueroa, and on the undercard, they had a great young fighter out of Philly. Really like him a lot. Stephen Fulton. He beat he's fought like 5 or 6 like undefeated fighters on the way up. I mean, he has not been put in light. And he beat another undefeated kid from Mexico, Isaac Avalar. He stopped him with a body shot in the 6th round. Fulton is, he's got kind of another lightly regarded crown at 122. He's the IBO champ, but he's a guy he's come up. He's a great amateur fighter, and he's come up tough. And he's now he's 17-0, 8 knockouts, and now they're talking about putting him in with Figueroa. I mean, it's a great fight, but is it too soon? I mean, both of these guys are just coming onto the horizon, and seem like they can be stars, but to match them now seems a little premature, right?
That's a double-edged sword. The reason is because fight fans want to see the best fights put together. Fight fans want to see prospects get tested. They want to see if they got a chin. They want to see if they can fight another guy that's hungry like them. They want to see them fight a gatekeeper. They want to see them be dragged through the mud, put into the deep end of the ocean to see whether they swim or they sink, right? But a lot of times, as a fight fan, sometimes we just don't know what the hell we want or what we're looking at. And I think that's when some managers need to step in and say, hey, is this the right time? Because I could tell you this. I remember back in 2012 when there was some talks of Joel Diaz Jr. and Guy Robb at the time out of Sacramento. There was talks of them getting in the ring. And everybody was like, oh, man, that'd be a great fight. But then I was talking to people in the business. They were like, that fight shouldn't happen.
Right.
It's going to be a great fight, but that fight should not happen. And then it got made, and it happened in Vegas. And I was lucky enough to be there right there ringside to cover the fight. And it was an all-out war from both guys. Both guys were going at it. But the guy that took the beating the most was Guy Robb. And you know what? After that, both the guys really didn't do much after the career. Guy Robb went off. He went on a dry spell, then later gets stopped. And that was the end of his career. Joel Diaz Jr., same thing. They weren't putting him in with real tests anymore because that fight took so much out of him, that now both guys never got to meet the potential that so many of us thought they would eventually reach. I'll give you another example. Timothy Bradley. You remember when Timothy Bradley was given a lot of heat about Devon Alexander? Everybody was like, we want to see that fight right now. And Timothy Bradley was kind of holding it off, saying, this fight shouldn't happen. This guy is not ready for me. Devon Alexander's not ready. And then it ended up happening. And guess what? The fight didn't live up to that hype. Right. So sometimes I think things should just be hold off a bit to see whether or not if these guys are going to meet down the road. Yeah, does it derail it sometimes? It does, but that's boxing. But I always like to find the right peak of these two fighters to get in. To me right now, I think there's enough for them to do. Well, maybe not, because everybody seems to be in other avenues, other streets, right?
Right. When you talk about the champions, it's double edged. Yeah, you got Navarrete and Daniel Roman and Ray Vargas, and pretty much one's on ESPN, the other two are on DAZN. So yeah, and these guys are on PBC, so they're kind of they're all on their different islands. I love the fight, but yeah, I completely hear what you're saying. And when I was I managed a lot of young prospects coming up, and I partnered with probably one of the best matchmakers ever, Johnny Boz. And Boz's philosophy was, listen, sometimes the best fights are the fights you don't take. When you're grooming somebody and you're bringing them up and you're looking for them to be a star. You don't take like the toughest fight out there. At every turn. I mean, I admire Stephen Fulton's courage and his management's courage in taking on some. I mean, they took on an undefeated Adam Lopez, who people think is a great prospect, and they beat him in a close fight. They took on Josh Greer, Touch of Sleep Greer, or whatever his nickname is now, the Top Rank sign. He beat him too. I mean, he's beaten some great young fighters, but the problem is nobody saw those fights. Those were on undercards, and those guys didn't make any money. And when you have a really bright prospect, do you really, you only get so many knocks to the head before it starts to affect you, man. So it's kind of like, it's a balancing act. You want them tested, but you don't want them in wars every time out. Like you said, I mean, prospects can ruin each other. It can happen. So, listen, it's a crapshoot. So we'll see what happens. But to my mind, it's a little too soon. I think these guys could, use a little more seasoning and a little more build up so that so it's worth it for both camps.
I'm completely with you on that. But I'll tell you what, the boxing ghoul in me wants to see it happen.
No doubt.
You know?
No doubt. I know it's like, you put your manager's hat on, you're saying one thing, but you put your boxing fan cap on, it's quite the opposite, right? You just want to see the great fights, and that indeed would be a great fight, two really skilled, young guys.
Right. And you know what? I got to say this. It's such a tough job to be a matchmaker. Fight fans don't really know how tough of a job it is, Like I take my hat off to like a Robert Diaz. I remember talking to Robert Diaz off air and on air, and Ryan Garcia, and he knew exactly what he had in front of him, and he knew the heat that he still continuously getting right now, of how they have to develop him. The guy stardom actually is way ahead of what he's done in terms of deserving in the ring, right? But he has to stay. Diaz has to stay very level-headed and understand what he has in front of him, and watch tons and tons and tons of tapes of different fighters, and understand where his fight is being developed, how if he's improving, where he needs to a little bit more improvement in. And to me, that's a difficult thing to do, because if I was a matchmaker, Kurt, I'd be pretty shitty at it, because I'd let pride get in the way. I'd be like, what, my guy can kick your guy's back, man. Get him in there, Where you can't do that in this business. You know what I mean? You just can't do that. You can't allow personal feelings, which is very difficult to do. I'm pretty sure you've been in the business for so long.
Absolutely. I've
to
definitely
get in the way to cloud your vision.
I put my guys in there, and I've overestimated their abilities a couple times. Yeah, I've definitely made mistakes with guys, and you're kicking yourself afterwards. But you learn, you don't know till they're in there tough, whether they got it or not. For sure. I had something in mind. I forgot what I was gonna say. But
I hate that. I hate when I do that.
No.
Yeah.
You were talking about you're talking about Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia to me is a really intriguing case, because he's good looking kid. He's got all of the media hype,
right.
Especially social media. The kid's like the king of social media. And the thing is, he's got tools, David. I mean, he's got like tremendous hand speed, and when he's connected with highlight reel one punch knockouts. I think it probably went to his head a little bit, because he's got those natural tools, and he's got pretty damn good amateur background too. He's got a good foundation. But then you see, like, his defense is just like putting his hands up and turning his body. I mean, it's like beyond basic. I mean, so he's got some like really huge red flags, along with just some really awesome weapons and natural gifts. So I love the move to Chepo Reynoso. I love that, because I think they've done an amazing job with Canelo, and the fact that he gets better with every fight still. I mean, it tells you those guys are top class trainers, and I can see them slowly improving Ryan. I think that was a tremendous move. They're matching him kind of tough though. In his next fight, he's taking on a Philly fighter whose record looks really unimposing, Avery Sparrow, but he's one of those Philly fighters who's just a natural born fighter and knows how to fight. And that's going to be a hell of a test. It really is going to be a hell of a test. And the thing with Ryan, too, David, if he loses, everyone's just going to completely jump off the hype train, and he's going to catch it, man. Because there's a lot of haters out there with him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's brought it on himself, though.
Yeah,
I mean, let's be honest. When here's the thing. He's every promoter's dream. The kid knows how to market himself. Just like when Bob Arum got a hold of Oscar De La Hoya. Had the looks, had a good backstory, all the necessities to build a star. Ryan has the image, but he doesn't, to me, not yet, he doesn't have what Oscar has, which is the real pure boxing abilities. Doesn't have the jab, doesn't have the IQ of what Oscar De La Hoya had at the time.
Right.
That still needs to be all developed, and slowly, Philly guy, who's a natural fighter, who's going to go out there and fight to win, not just a fight to show up.
Right.
That's, to me, is going to be the test, because I'll tell you this, about Ryan. He's got the hand speed. But every time I watch him, and you're right, Chepo and the team have done really good with small adjustments, what they've done with him.
Right.
But it's always going to be, in my opinion, it's always going to be a question every fight until he gets to that defined fight to erase all questions about him. Because this Philly kid that's going to get in there with him, in my opinion, may take him to the breaking test point of whether or not Chepo's training methods are really, really working. Because, Ryan's always been the bigger kid,
right.
Taller, faster. When we did see him get confused in there is when somebody starts trying to maul him up a bit, and he didn't really know what to do and find the inside. He's been fighting a little bit better in the inside, So my curiosity comes with, okay, we saw him do that, but he was fighting a smaller guy, and what happens when he gets in there with a guy that's a little bit more determined, that can actually fight inside with him? What happens then? Does he stick to his game plan? Does he stick to what Chepo and them have been doing? Or does he fall and crumble all apart? Because we know he can market himself beautifully. We just don't know how good of a fighter he can become.
Absolutely. And with Sparrow, those Philly trainers are in the lab right now looking really close at everything Garcia does and see how they can pick him apart. That's going to be a great fight. I'm really looking forward to that one. But hey, man, let's talk about the big guys. Pretty interesting development this week. You had, it seems like the Andy Ruiz, Anthony Joshua rematch is on for Saudi Arabia in December. But it's interesting, especially for my profession when, someone just happened to be, trolling the dockets, the federal dockets, and they saw, wow, Matchroom just, filed a lawsuit against Andy Ruiz and Tom Brown Promotions. So I was like, whoa, maybe this isn't a done deal.
Did you really think that it was going to go that easy, though? Kurt, let me ask you that. Did you really think that it was going to go that smooth? I mean, because I remember when the fight happened after, there was people giving me a lot of flack because I had said on social media, like, the rematch is not going to happen so smoothly. Trust me, once you have the belt, things change.
Right. And
exactly that's what happened. And I said, and you got Al Heyman on your corner as well. Things are going to change a bit. Guys, contracts are contracts in boxing, but what's stated in there is completely different. What we don't really know what's being put in those contracts. So I didn't know what was being put in that contract of whether or not they had a fight on a certain day, whether or not they had a fight on UK soil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're right. But I also said that in boxing, and I'm pretty sure you would know more about this, sometimes boxing contracts don't even really matter. It could be broken. It could be torn apart. Some promoters with a lot of money are willing to go to court, you know what I mean, and delay it for as long as they can to get what they want, try to outweigh the other guy. So right. I wasn't surprised by this, that there was going to be such a wait. And it really wasn't that long of a wait. If you really think about it.
Right.
Wasn't that long of a wait.
Yeah, I think with this one, just, I don't know the exact, wording in the contracts, and I don't know the deal that these guys struck, but just knowing, of the contract negotiations between Matchroom and Miller, and kind of knowing what went on with that, pretty sure that what they had for the rematch clause was that you've got, that basically the rematch, you have, the promoter has the ability to name the site and the date. Like Matchroom had exclusive right to do that. So Ruiz had no say in that. And also apparently he agreed to like a sum certain, what did they say? It was like $7 or $8 million. I don't know, $6-7 million, or I think it was $8 million for the rematch. So all of that was kind of in black and white. But like you say, I mean, because not every single detail is ironed out. You know, Ruiz is going to like fight and kick and scream. And especially when they found out how much money Eddie Hearn was getting from Saudi Arabia, they're just like, hell no, we're not taking what we got in there. But I think what you saw with what you saw with this lawsuit was, you know, they were fighting as much as they could. But then, you know, I think when Eddie we don't know what went on behind the scenes, but I'm sure Eddie was threatening the lawsuit. When he actually filed the lawsuit, they're kind of like, listen, we're not going to win this lawsuit. So, I mean, it's in black and white. So if they're offering us a couple million more, you know, we got to take it. So, I mean, I don't have any inside information that's how it played out, but that's my best guess as to how it played out.
You know what? If I had my way, because nowadays everybody's intrigued with reality TV shows. If I'm wrong, wouldn't we all be glued to the TV if these promoters and these managers put cameras, cameras on their hats and just let us watch every detail, every argument, every contract being drawn up, so that we could have a glimpse of their world of what was happening. To me, it's really interesting. You know, I know that some people don't want to hear the politics of it, but
right.
I sit back and I don't get that upset. I don't know why, but I'm not one of those that get so outraged of what, you know, one guy is doing, you know, or like hearing that Dana White wants to get into boxing or Jay-Z was getting into boxing. I'm not one of those that get so upset with it. But I'm very intrigued by it. I'm very intrigued of how they're going to, you know, mesh with each other to make good fights happen. And you know, as much as the kicking and screaming that we were witnessing, not just between the two fighters, but the fans as well, I gotta tell you this, that it made it more interesting to want to witness this rematch now. You know, whereas I would have been okay, because I said this. I said that, you know what, if it doesn't happen, I'm cool with it, because there's so many other players in the division that will make a good round of boxing, that I'm okay with it. But since there was bickering the way there was, I tell you what, I'm now very, very much interested in seeing this rematch.
Well, yeah, I guess not surprisingly, when people fight over money, they get a little bitter about it. You know, so I mean, look at Canelo and Triple G, man. I think like their negotiations and all the stuff that went on pre-fight is pretty much, you know, they had a good relationship before the first fight, and now they're like bitter enemies, man. So yeah, I think it definitely adds some. It adds spice. It adds spice to Ruiz Joshua too. And it's funny that you talk about the reality show, you know, like behind the scenes, because I remember when they did the Super Six on Showtime, one of the episodes they had, like, you know, was like a behind the scenes with the promoters all talking about it, and everyone's like, "Damn, that was cool, man!" You actually got to see, you know, these guys, you know, talking about, you know, the fights and kind of jockeying for a position and all this. So like, that's interesting stuff. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's you know, every sport kind of, you know, nowadays like NBA free agency is like more interesting than the actual season. You know, it's like who's going to get what.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and it is, you know, fans do like to have a glimpse of that insight. You know, on Leaving the Ring a long time ago when I had started, I actually did a series, and I was talking to Comcast back in that time. I can't even remember. I think it was like in 2010. But I went, and what the series was, it was called The Hurt Game. And what we did is we went and interviewed a promoter, a manager, a cut man, the fighter that was coming up at the time, which was Andre Ward, a trainer, which was coming up at the time, had a lot of clout at the time, was Henry Ramirez, and then Chris Oriola. We interviewed a bunch of these people, and some fighters, but a lot of the people behind the business. And we wanted to kind of show you that world. So, and I was only able to release one of the episodes, which I put it on our YouTube channel. Actually, two of them, I believe. No, just one that we really did. We edited pretty well, as much as we could at that time, because it was so limited with the YouTube. And we put the Henry Ramirez interview. But yeah, I mean, when I went and did that, I went and spoke to Dan Goosen, who's no longer with us. Right. I had a great sit down with him. But then I had a chance to go sit down with a very small promoter in Tijuana, and had a chance to hear their horror stories of what they go through, of setting up these smaller cards and dealing with fighters that either don't show up or they can't seem to find a fill-in, so they got to make the guy switch the IDs and step in place for the commission. Even though the commission knows that all this guy's doing, it's like the guy could give an ID of his sister, and all they need is an ID to let him step into the ring. They didn't even care if the name matched or the face matched on the picture, And right. I've always sat back and said, man, wouldn't it be great if somebody with right now that has the power to do that bring up a series like that,
Right.
I mean, I would probably release what I have, but it's outdated now. You know what I mean? There's a lot of the players no longer exist in boxing right now.
It's funny. I think Gary Shaw at one point in time was trying to get like a reality show done on him, but that didn't quite take. But yeah, it would definitely be interesting. When to see how the sausage is made. Like how negotiations go, and
right.
I mean, listen, I think. What would probably be more interesting is if you have, everyone's kind of, the formula for these like pre-fight things, the 24/7s and all that. I mean, it's been there, done that. I think maybe you include a little more of the business side on it, and I think that would maybe spice it up or, make it a little fresher, when they do these type of things. But speaking of the business and guys getting into the business, I definitely want to talk to you about, you said you had a chance to listen to Dana White's interview with Chris Mannix, and Dana's talking about how he's going to make big announcements in October. And I mean, we've kind of heard this before though, because he's been talking about Zuffa boxing for a couple of years. There's always going to be a big announcement. Oh, we're going to do it then. He hasn't really gotten it going, but it does seem like he's a little more serious about it this time. So, what do you expect is going to happen in October? And what do you think about Dana White getting into the boxing business?
Well, I mean, he's already dabbing in it. He's doing stuff with Lou DiBella. Right. Was putting Lou's Broadway boxing on his UFC pass. I think some of the points that he brought up being that boxing's fractured, and it's always been the entry to somebody with money to step into boxing, because they understand that the structure's not there. It's fractured. Al Heyman understood that. Al Heyman did a fantastic job of being invisible with a lot of power and building a brand. Not building fighters. I don't think that was his main plan. His plan was to build a brand, to sell it as a TV package to networks. I'm not sure what Dana can do. And I don't even think Dana really knows at this point, because I think he was being very realistic in that interview with Chris Mannix, which Chris did a great job.
Right,
I think Chris was trying to get...
He did.
It's at the limit that he was able to, because I could really feel that Chris wanted to get the in-depth interview that he asked Dana to be on for.
Right.
But Dana immediately shut that down by saying, hey, I can't reveal this, I can't reveal that. Now, normally I've done over 100, 200 interviews, and normally when I get somebody off the bat telling me, I can't really do this, or blah, 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 that already tells me it's because they don't really, either don't have all the information, the knowledge of it, or truth is they just don't want you to know about it.
Right.
Because maybe they're already in dealings with contracts, and it could ruin whatever's being, put down up forth. So that's not what I got off of him. But with him saying, though, this is what I would want to do, but I'm not even sure if it could work. I actually enjoyed that. I don't know if that makes any sense. I enjoyed it because there was truth to what he was saying. Because everybody comes in with great ideas for boxing. We've seen this.
Yes.
This is not the first time. We've seen a power player come into the sport and say, hey, well, I could do this, because they believe all that is needed is money.
Right.
And that's not how it works.
Or they're going to come in and like change everything that's wrong with boxing. But
Right.
then nothing ever gets changed.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, as much as boxing is kind of governed by like government, the way it's so fractured right now of the state that we're at right now, there is no chosen one.
Right.
I don't see a chosen one
to
fix all of this here.
Yeah, it's a completely different environment than what he's operating in MMA, where I mean the UFC in essence, I mean they invented modern day MMA. They created a sport. I mean, boxing's been around for over a century, and it's
exactly
it kind of at this point in time, like you said, there's never been that aha moment like barnstorming baseball teams had and barnstorming football teams had, where they're like, wow, let's form a league, let's all work together collectively, or like NASCAR did, or like the tennis players did, or the golfers did. There's never been that moment where they've all decided to work collectively together for the greater good of the sport. And amazing how when you do that, it works out. Like suddenly, your sport maxes out its potential. You bring in a ton more money than you were making before, and people can follow the sport because the best are all in one place and they're competing against each other. Boxing, for whatever reason, just refuses. They've gotten the memo, but they just refuse to do anything about it. I don't know that Dana White's going to be a big player coming in. I mean, he's going to have a lot of money behind him, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got William Morris behind him. But you got to have the horses. In boxing, you got to have the great fighters, and they're all spread out. I mean, we were conjecturing. John Nash and I had both heard that they were thinking of buying the PBC, and it's been confirmed that there were meetings, but there have been meetings for a long time. I don't know if there's anything imminent or not with that, but I mean, if he's going to make any splash in the sport, he's going to have a decent roster of fighters to wield any power. And to me, that would seemingly be the only way he's going to make any kind of difference. I mean, if he's just got a bunch of guys who can't fight, I mean, no one's going to care. I mean, the boxing crowd is, they're vociferous, they're sophisticated, they're cynical. If you don't have the goods, they'll let you know. So
yeah, and here's another thing too. The UFC brand is thriving, right? They have their brand. They've done a great job. The whole team for today. I look at it as like any entrepreneur. When you have your baby, your business, it's your baby, and you once you start trying to like create another baby, a twin, that never seems to pan out correctly.
Right.
Because now you're taking away from the other stuff, And to me, Dana would have to put 120, 30, 60% in the boxing. It's a long haul game in boxing. It's not a short haul game with them. We see this with promoters. I see a lot of, I get a lot of, press releases from promoters that are starting up their company and, hey, could you take a look at this? And they're probably around for about a good year. I mean, that's a good run, a good year, but then they're gone.
Right.
They're a whistle in the wind.
Right.
Because they can't seem to get their, real horses to run in their race. And that's the first thing that popped in my mind. I said this a long time ago when I remember Dana was talking about getting into boxing. If I remember correctly, I remember this. Gabriel Montoya interviewed Dana White, and this is when Dana was saying boxing was dead because HBO killed not HBO, the Vegas killed the sport of boxing, took away the formula of building fighters, which is hometown grown fighters. Not letting them fight in their hometown, putting them in small casinos. And I completely agreed with that. I was like, we've been saying this for a long time.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
And, and he was mentioning all that. And I was like, well, the only way you can really, have a successful promotion business is if you have the right horses on your team. The way Al Heyman did it,
Right.
Al snuck in the back door and went out the front door with a bunch of fighters, which was, hey, it's a business. It's cutthroat. I know some folks don't like it. Some folks get really upset. mentioned Schaefer's name. There's grinding of teeth, but business is business.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And it's been like that for a long time. Yeah. I mean, King and Aram used to completely sabotage each other to get fighters, man. It's like they went back and forth trying to steal each other's fighters. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a draw of blood in this game, you know. But you know what? I welcome Dana,
right?
Because he is another character for the sport, and he may be able to. He's got charisma,
right?
And I think that just like Eddie Hearn. Eddie has this way of speaking to people and making people, draw them in. I mean, come on, man. I mean, I've never seen fans stand up for a promoter the way I see fans right now. I mean, he's got a cult following him right now. You know, you say anything bad about Eddie, and they come at you like if you spoke about their dad or something. You know, that's pretty crazy. So I think Dana may be able to do that, bring the American audience. White young audience that are not intrigued by boxing right now. He may be able to bring that graphic to the sport of boxing for a short bit and show them a glimpse of what we love.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, if there's an audience that's kind of been lost a little bit, because, white guys used to be, there used to be a lot of great white fighters in the sport. And, by the 70s, the white guys were, just not really competing and becoming champions anymore. So I think people kind of lost it, white people lost interest in the sport. I think I can, as a white person, I think I can speak a little bit for white people. They lost a little bit of interest in the sport, but yeah, and there's no secret that it's the UFC has a pretty strong white following. So bring them on in. Like you said, Dana's talked about the sport being broken, and he makes a lot of great points. I mean, I was trying to piece out like what he actually is going to do to fix it. One of the things he's one of the things he's talking about is maybe spreading the wealth a little more, kind of like they do in the UFC. But
right.
But everyone knows that the UFC fighters, they don't get anywhere near the percentage cut that the boxers do on those fights. So
no,
Dana White kind of has the more of a Don King model of boxing, where it's like, the
right. And what is he talking about? Al is really, he has spread the wealth. Let's not take that away from Al Heyman.
Oh, absolutely.
These fighters are making great money, right? And it's even making these fighters not want to fight other really challenges because they're getting paid so well,
right.
So that's where I would have put a stop to. I'd be like, well, wait a minute, you're saying that these fighters are not getting paid. They are getting paid.
Oh,
that's
definitely.
why we're seeing fights not being made the way it used to be. Where guys wanted to fight for legacy. Now we see guys more fighting for their wallet, which rightfully so.
Right.
I said this a long time ago on Leave the Ring. I said, we asked for something for so long. We asked for our fighters to get smarter in business, and then we finally got it, and now we're pissed about it because they're not dumbing themselves anymore. Right?
Right.
But like I said, Dana, when I heard that part with Chris Manson, he said that, I spread the wealth, my guys are buying houses and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but your guys are not even getting paid a fraction of what with boxers are getting paid and stuff. And you've always had a monopoly over what is said and what is done with your fighters,
Right.
But like I said, I welcome him to the. I think he's a great addition to whatever he can do, but I think it's going to be short-lived, like his boxing contender series that he had.
Yeah, exactly. People forget that he had that reality show that fell flat, like nobody watched it. Yeah, I mean,
nobody watched it. Yeah.
Again, yeah, it's all about the horses. I mean, there's speculation. He's talked about he's hired someone who's gonna run the boxing side of it or help run the boxing side of it, and a lot of speculation about who that is. Some people think it's Keith was it Veltray from Roy Jones Promotions, who's working with Dana now, putting all those fights on Fight Pass, or someone said Kerry Davis, maybe the old HBO exec. I have no idea who it is, but I'll be interested to find out. And yeah, listen, welcome to boxing, Dana. I hope I hope that you work more with other promoters in boxing than you do in MMA, which is pretty much non-existent. Fights between promotions.
See, we don't even know how his negotiating skills are with other promoters because of that reason.
Right.
Right. And we don't even know how aggressive he's going to be to try to get the right ponies in his stable. I mean, is he gonna be DAZN aggressive? Is he gonna be Al Heyman aggressive?
I think so. He's a bully, I mean, he's a driven guy, and but so is Arum, and so is Heyman, and so is Hearn. So I hope it doesn't create like a fourth island where only Dana's fighters fight Dana's fighters, and I just hope it doesn't fracture the sport further. Ideally he'd come in with a lot of money and a network and kind of do things like the Super Series is doing, the World Boxing Super Series, where create some tournaments and bring the William Morris money, where they're actually these maybe the other promoters like Arum hasn't really participated in the World Boxing Super Series. Like, it would be nice if these guys all came together and got that going.
Yeah, any tournament.
Exactly. Yeah. Except since the '60s when Bob did the heavyweight tournament. Yeah, I don't know that any of his fighters have really done any tournament action, but yeah.
Right.
But hey, man, let's.
Dana.
Go ahead.
Just really quick, I think with Dana, to finish it off with Dana, though, I tell you what he does bring to the table. He's a marketing genius. The guy knows how to package something very well, and it's something that boxing could really, really use. So if that's one thing that he has on his side to entice fighters to jump from whatever stable they're at into his pony stable, it'd be how he would package you, right? Because he does a great job.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn have admitted that they've basically looked at the UFC and how they presented events, and they've learned a lot. They've changed the way they do business. So yeah, I mean, there's no two ways about it. Dana brings a lot to the sport. I mean, he really does. I mean, you can't deny the UFC success and how they basically took a company that was failing and turned it around and made it into this monster that has a massive TV deal on ESPN. And has become, almost pretty much a mainstream sport at this point in time. So yeah, I mean, welcome Dana. Well, let's see what you can do. But yeah, man, I wanted to get into your background a little bit before I let you go. Just wanted to get into your background, like where you're from and how'd you first get interested in boxing?
Ooh, okay. So I got into the sport because of my grandfather.
Okay.
My grandfather Mario, who raised me, at a very young age. My uncles, cousins, all fight fans or involved in boxing. Was going to a boxing gym at a young age called Starlight in east side of San Jose. Downtown San Jose, and then moved to east side. I was born in downtown San Jose, born and raised in downtown San Jose my whole life. Always loved the sport. Boxed for a while when I was able to, because I started a family at a very young age. Was a plumber for 24 years, and how I got into covering the sport, being part of the media, was because a really good friend of mine named Butch Collins was like my boxing brother from another mother. Was a guy that I was, because I used to commute. 4 hours out of the day to work and back. It was in total 4 hours, and Butch used to through those times in traffic, and all we did was talk boxing. We talked about life here and there, but it always evolved around boxing, and he used to train out of the King's Gym out of Oakland, where Virgil Hunter and Andre Ward were from. He knew them very well. He knew Ward and Hunter really good before Ward even went pro. I remember we used to get in very heated arguments about Ward because I didn't think very much of Ward in the beginning. I watched Ward in the Olympics and whatever. And then what happened is my buddy, he passed away. At a really young age. He was only 32 years old, and it had a major effect on me, man. I mean, I went to like a really dark place, And my sister was coming around, so I didn't really, just like 2007, 2008, right? There wasn't a whole lot of the internet stuff. I mean, there was, but I was not into it, right?
Right.
And my sister came down and brought me a computer, and she was like, "Hey, check this thing called YouTube, and there's these guys that go on there and they talk boxing." And so she set it up for me, and I started watching it, and I just kind of binged on it, right? And I was a subscriber to Max Boxing, so I read a lot. I read I collected Ring magazines. I mean, dude, I wore out Ring magazines and like Boxing Digest,
right?
And whatever I can get a hold of, I just wore it out from page. I would read an article literally 10, 20 times, because it was my fix. I had to get my fix in. So when I got a hold of this YouTube and I watched it, I binged on it. I watched all these guys' videos, and this is like blood boxing and pound for pound boxing, and God, I can't remember all the names anymore. But I remember like one of the guys, and these guys are the reason why I got on YouTube. Anyways, they were saying some stuff. Oh no, it was pound for pound. That's right. Pound for pound was talking about Mexican fighters, saying how Mexican fighters weren't very intelligent fighters. And I was like, and my sister by chance was there. And I started cussing at the screen. I was like, what the F are these guys talking about, dude? They've never seen Salvador Sanchez. And I started going off about, some of the most intelligent fighters to ever grace the ring for Mexico. And then my sister comes in. She's like, what's wrong with you? And I was just telling her, these guys don't know what the hell they're talking about. So my sister goes, well, if you think you know so much, buddy, why don't you do a video? And I was like, no, that's stupid. I was like, I don't have a voice. You know what I mean? Who's going to want to listen to me? And my sister's like, I don't know. Just get on there. Why don't you talk about things that you think that should be covered that nobody's, covering? And I was like, well, I'll talk about things that I would like to hear. If there was a radio show out there to listen to, if I was on a commute drive. And so I think my very first video was talking about the Contender Series, about why the success wasn't there and why it was being dropped by networks and et cetera, et cetera. It was just my opinion. And then the next video was about, because a lot of folks were saying, there was comments and stuff. They were saying, hey, Antonio Margarito and Paul Williams are just big old bullies at 147. And then I was just trying to point out, that this has been done for years. Guys normally not fighting at their natural weight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Next you know it, man, I started getting requests. And from the first one was like 100-something views, that when I dropped the Oscar De La Hoya versus Manny Pacquiao video, I did I think in 1 week, man, like 3,000-something views. And then I started dropping more videos, and all of a sudden, Jack Mosley, I think I was like 8 or 10 videos in or something, and Jack Mosley reached out to me on YouTube and said, hey, I'd like for you to come down to Pomona and do an interview. And I was just like, what? Dude, I'm not a media guy. I don't know anything about that. I'm not a journalist. I'm just a guy that likes to chop it up, boxing, and I'm a fanatic. That's what I am. I'm a boxing zombie. And he said, no, come through. So we went down there, and you could see that video. That video is up on the 97 Rough channel, and you could see how unraw and unprepared, that I was. But the good thing is I watched so much tape of like Shane Mosley, and I was a fan of Shane. And then I had read in numerous KO articles, ring articles about matches that, or ground fights that Shane had with Azuma Nelson and Julio Cesar Chavez, that those were very difficult tapes to find and get. And I actually had them. Not the Azuma Nelson one, but the Chavez, I had them at the time, which you could only at that time was able to get VHS, which I got off the Boxing Digest and KO. Do you remember they had in the back classifieds? You remember that?
Yes, absolutely.
So you could just purchase, right? So that's how I had it. So I went out there, and just from that, in one interview, it just took off.
Nice.
And I was like, well, what do I do with this? What do I do with these interviews? And, and I remember this, man, this was funny because I was sitting on my couch watching.
Oop, you're cutting out.
I know a lot of people give a lot of shit to Teddy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I know a lot of folks would get they give a lot of crap to Teddy Atlas.
Right.
But I was sitting there and I was like, man, wouldn't it be great to talk to Teddy Atlas just once? And if I could just talk to Teddy and just pick his brain, I'll be done. I won't do any more interviews. I won't even attempt this, because I really didn't think, Kurt, that they was going to go anywhere, to tell you the truth. I was just like, a spur of the moment, I was just on for the ride. You know what I mean? I was on this roller coaster, and I was enjoying every second and every minute of it.
Right.
And next you know it, I run into Teddy Atlas, and I'm like, hey, can I interview on my podcast? He's like, sure. And it just became very easy to start bringing guys on. Oh, and I didn't have a podcast at the time. I'm sorry. It was on YouTube. And it was just really easy just doing that.
Right. So when did you start with the podcast?
At the time, from Stand and Fight Art. Well, that's so in 2010, a friend of mine who was helping me develop, because before it was Leaving the Ring, was called There Will Be Blood. That was the name of the YouTube channel show.
Right.
And but I was getting a lot of heat for it. I had Kelly Swanson cuss me out. She called me and cussed me out. She was like, who in the F do you think you are? Because I was interviewing Golden Boy fighters. And she thought I was an MMA guy. So I was getting turned down for credentials or even interviews because of the name of the show.
Right.
There Will Be Blood.
Right.
They thought I was a UFC guy trying to cover boxing and trying to badmouth boxing, right? So the guy that was helping me, he designed the logo and all that, Art from Stand and Fight, told me, hey, why don't you do a podcast? And I was like, how? And he introduced me to Blog Talk. And we did a trial run with it. And then I said, we'd be a good idea bringing the other guys from YouTube on there, and we could just talk boxing. But I don't want to call it There Will Be Blood. There's just too many confusion. People think that it's an MMA or UFC show. And I didn't know shit about that sport. Right. So that's when I just said, what if we called it Leave It in the Ring? And it just took off from there.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, I mean, yeah, you've had, some great, shows and, Gabriel and Steve Kim were, had shows on your network and so on. So when did you start like putting other shows and all that on the Leave It in the Ring network?
Well, Gabriel he's never been on other, he was on the next round for very long, so before he got on Leaving in the Ring. But I met Gabriel at Tashi Palace. We were covering an Andre Ward fight, and we just hit it off. Honestly, it was like we had known each other our whole lives. You know what I mean? We had that much in common. And we would talk for hours on the phone about boxing, and I was just like, dude, I mean, we were literally on the phone for 3 or 4 hours, and I'm like, why don't you just be part of the show, be a co-host? Because at the time there was like 5 of us, right? And a lot of the guys left little by little. Everybody, just like everything else, a marriage falls apart if the foundation's not poured correctly. Everybody had different ideas and wanted to do different things, which I've never had stopped anybody. And they went off and did their own stuff. And but Gabriel was the only one that stuck around. And how other shows came about was really when Max Boxing closed down. I mean, not closed down. They basically were cutting their budget. Well, let me take that back because I really don't know, and I don't want to say something that I really was not even part of. But I just knew that Steve Kim and Gabriel Montoya were leaving Max Boxing at the time. And the next round was basically just going to be sitting there. And they decided to do a podcast on their own. And it was just Gable felt it'd be the right marriage to put the next round on the Leaving the Ring, under Leaving the Ring, because we already had such a established fan base,
right?
Right. And it just made sense, right? And so when we did that, that's when other podcasters were coming to us and saying, "Hey, I'd love to put our show under you guys and do a trial run." And we did that. I had Felipe Leon on there from oh God, what was this? He was from from Box Rex and he's gonna kill me because I can't remember the other name of the website he was from. It was very Fight. I think it was Fight.com or something like that. And he did a great job, and he even did Leave It in the Ring with me for a while. But we just had a difference in creativity, and we just parted ways and did our own separate things. Brian Fogg, who's the writer for baseball now, and out of Arizona, he was on Leave It in the Ring. Not on Leave It in the Ring, he had his own show as well called The Boxing Fix. Was doing a great job, but it got too much for him because of his time schedule. He just wasn't there. So I always noticed that there was always, because we had, at the time we were covering PEDs very, really thick, man. I mean, we were up to our necks covering PEDs, me and Gabriel Montoya at the time, and especially at the height of the time when Bada was being introduced to the world, and Bada was the organization with the black hat because nobody understood what they were doing and what they stood for, right?
Right.
So we were taking a lot of heat at that time. So me and Gabriel sat down and we were like, okay, we got a lot of haters. We got a lot of people that don't like us and not understanding what we're doing. We need to lighten it up. We need to get some other show on to get people to know what I mean, to have a different, just to give them a break from us. And Ernesto Gabillon from Everlast at the time was looking. He was working with the Everlast. Still is with Everlast, but he was with the boxing scene, and I knew that he wanted to do a podcast. And we had talked, and he was on Leave It in the Ring for a short bit, and he wanted to do a show for boxing scene. So we brought him on, and I named the show The Boxing Lab. And so we gave everybody a chance to have different shows with different hosts that come with different aspects for the fight game. And I've continued to like the way that is run. So that's when we found Evan Rokowski, who does a great job with aficionados. And I was a huge fan of yours when you were when you started your podcast, which, you had just kind of started, running it. And I loved your stories. And I mean, I literally felt like I was there. Like this is a conversation that we were having. And that's when I was like, hey, this guy needs more listeners. This guy needs more, people to tune in and hear your interviews and your insight of the fight game. So that's when I had reached out to you, and and it's been it's continued to be a good run, man.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate it. I've definitely enjoyed my time here, and I miss you and Gabriel going, but I know you guys you'll get it back going soon. So I got one more for you before I let you go. Any advice for folks wanting to start a podcast in the current landscape where now there's like 1,000,001 podcasts? I mean, any advice on starting one up?
Well, God, that's a tough one. When podcasting started up and everybody was kind of new to it, I helped out a lot of shows to do their startup. A lot of the guys, a lot of them are not around anymore, but some are. Some are doing really well with their podcast shows and whatnot. I'll tell you what I think that a lot of these boxing podcasts that I do come across, or I have podcasters sending me their show to listen to. And asking me their opinion, and a lot of times I don't answer back because I don't feel that's right of me to criticize anybody's show. Even though some podcasters really piss me off, man, some of the stuff that they say. But I think what a lot of guys are doing wrong is that they're trying to be the star of the sport, or they're speaking out of their terms in terms of like putting themselves as if they've been there, or they've done this. I try not to do that at all. I try to keep it as biased as I can. unbiased as I can. I'm sorry. Because that, we don't really know. We can speculate and we can speak to different managers and promoters and whatnot. But, really honestly in the fight game, as you know, Kurt, is that the truth what you're being told at the moment can be the truth, but in 5 minutes it can change immediately.
Right.
And I think a lot of guys, trying to friend a fighter, which I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way of not being friends with fighters, because they're humans and they're trying to get their careers up and going. They're trying to get themselves out there as well, So you may think you have all the access in the world to them, but once they hit that pinnacle what they were trying to get to, don't be surprised they cut you off.
Right.
Don't be surprised they don't return your calls anymore.
Right.
And I see a lot of these guys that they think that, they're calling them, well, my boy's he's gonna fight tonight. My boy's gonna do this, and my buddy. Look, just deliver whatever content you're trying to get across, and try to get it as clear as you can, and try to do as much research you can before speaking on something, and just keep it, across the board as much as you can, because like I said, in boxing, the truth can change in 5 minutes, and it's happened to everybody. A lot of times, if the one thing about leaving the ring, I used to tell when I had my website, I had on the beat guys working for me at the time, I always just tell them, don't write something without having 3 or 4 sources.
Right.
Cross-check everything that you're going to report, because it can bite us in the ass. And thankfully, nothing like that ever really happened to us. I know a lot of people were hoping, because we were breaking PD's stories. Gabriel was breaking them like hotcakes, man. I mean, you couldn't pitch a curveball to the guy because he'd hit it out of the park. If you're going to be seen, especially in boxing, stick with it, but be 120% with it. Really hone your craft on that. Don't be like some of these guys out there, which steal other people's hard work and then trying to own it. Try to act like you're the one that started it. Give the people that actually paved that way the props, man. That's the right way of doing it. I see that too much in boxing, and I know that it's a cutthroat business, but it doesn't mean that we can't be human to each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, I second all of that. Yeah, definitely. If you're getting information from other places, give attribution. If you're citing someone else's hard work, give them credit for it. I think with podcasts, there's so many good ones out there for like that I've enjoyed listening to. I can't keep up with them all at this point, to be honest with you. In boxing, there's a lot of good people doing some good work. But I just think it's great. Like you once upon a time, you're just a huge fan. You're excited about the sport, and you wanted to share your enthusiasm, and I'm glad to see that a lot of people are, and I'm certainly glad that you started when you did, and are still keeping it going, man. So really appreciate your time, my man.
I had a lot of people pissed at me.
Really?
Yeah, definitely, brother. Yeah. At the beginning, I had a lot of people pissed at me. I remember Mario. I don't, do you know Mario Serrano? He's a good friend of mine. I've known Mario for years and stuff. He's a PR guy. He started with Robert Guerrero. So I remember a long time ago, he told me face to face. I can't remember what event we were at. We were sitting at a bar, just hanging out, and he said, it's your fault. Because I used to encourage people a lot to start their own YouTube channel, start their own, podcasting. Because I'm one of the original boxing YouTube channels. There was only like 4 or 5, and that was like the 6th or 7th one at the time. And then it was me and this other guy named Jose Aguirre on Fire that were putting interviews on.
I remember
on
Jose, yeah. And
remember him? And he did a great job. He was I loved his work, and then Mario was like, now we're getting guys from like that think they know what they're talking about on YouTube or doing podcasting, and you really started that trend. It's your fault. And then I had other people from like Golden Boy tell me the same thing. But hey, it was bound to happen without my help or anybody else's.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's, there's a lot, there are some things that, there's definitely ones out there that aren't that good, but there's plenty more that are really good. So yeah, man, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time out and talking and, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday and, hey, take care, man.
Thank you, brother, for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was absolute pleasure, man. Absolute pleasure, man. All right, my man. And that will do it for another edition of the Boxing Esquire podcast, presented by The Ring and ringtv.com and distributed by the Leave It in the Ring network. Really like to thank David Duenez for taking the time out to speak with me today. If you like the podcast, please leave a comment or a rating on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Audio Boom, SoundCloud, or wherever you access the Boxing Esquire podcast. I'd really appreciate it as it helps new listeners find the podcast. And also, do not forget to check out my companion piece to this podcast on ringtv.com that features quotes and background on my interview with David. And until next time, so long, everybody.
Get what you was looking for?